Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, a returning guest to the podcast, someone I haven't spoken to for a long time. It's high time we caught up again, and I'm pleased to welcome Calvin Betton back. Calvin, how are you?
Very well yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. As I was saying just before we jumped on, this is the first podcast I'm recording since Flo, the Cocker Spaniel, Cavalier King Charles Spaniel cross puppy arrived in our household. So it's going to be an interesting experience because I may have to dart off because she may have decided to start to attack my daughter.
Okay, well, could be it's a different constraint. It'll be affecting the environment.
It is definitely, yeah. It's an interesting training experience. I'm using some interesting methods.
yeah, indeed.
So anyway, let's kind of circle back. What's happening in your world? And I know we've got a couple of themes to talk about today, but let's just what's been going on.
Not much since I last spoke. I don't think the tennis tour as a whole is in a bit of a. I'm going to be kind and call it a transition period. If I wasn't going to be kind, I'd call it a mess. But hopefully we're close to getting something sorted out. They've left a lot of tennis players without a sort of pathway, really, which from a sort of development perspective hasn't helped greatly.
Right. So this is like having worked in golf for a long time, is this essentially the equivalent of the Challenge Tour in golf?
We should have gone to something like the Challenge Tour. They've kind of tried to do that, but they've gone into a halfway house. So they've got two separate rankings, but one tour. And it's just having that has caused a load of chaos where personally, I think they should have gone to two separate tours with a qualification and a relegation. But that's what they looked like they were going to do. They haven't done that. And I think the main problem is they've done this without really speaking to anybody who has experience on the tour. They say they spoke to 55,000 people, but everybody I spoke to, nobody knows anybody who's spoken to them about it. So, it's absolute uproar at the minute.
Right. So from a player development perspective, obviously competition as a constraint is a major challenge. From the coaching standpoint, we've had some exchanges since we last spoke. What's happening in your world in terms of coaching? Are you seeing any movement in the skill acquisition space? I know I've had some interesting conversations with people within the tennis community, and it seems to me like things are moving in a direction, but maybe it's just because I'm in an echo chamber and I'm only speaking to certain people.
I think a lot more people are talking about it. I'm not sure how it's manifesting itself in the field. I know sort of things have happened like regional training, this kind of thing is going on, but I know there's still a lot of closed drilling, a lot of norms drilling. Is the basis of a lot of regional training, and that's from sort of under 10s upwards, which is not something I'm entirely over the moon about whatsoever. A lot of international players can hit this many cross-court forehands in a minute and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's not something I'm entirely chuffed about. There's, like I said, it's a lot of, you can get what I'm talking about.
So norms drilling is essentially saying there are these players who can do this, and therefore you in the pathway need to be able to do this if you want to progress to that level.
Yeah, there is. There's a sheet that went out of at each age. I think there's a group of about 10 tests.
Right.
And there was a sort of norm sheet that went out. This is how many you do if you're county level. This is how many you do if you're national. This is how many you do if you're regional. This is how many you do if you're international. And each one of those was, the ones that I've seen were very closed.
Right. So essentially, there's a feeder feeding the ball, and they have to then perform the shot over and over and over and over again without any great deal of variability.
Yeah, there's no variability. The feeder might be the other player. So
right.
I mean, one of them, for example, was smashing. You've got to, if you're on one side of the net, you're feeding me smashes. I'm going to see how many smashes I can hit within a minute or a minute and a half. I don't remember what the exact time frame was. How many I can hit in the court into a particular area, that type of thing.
And so the only variability comes from the ability of the feeder to place the ball into rough areas. There is a degree of variability, I suppose, but it's still pretty closed in the sense of you're going to hit the same shot over and over again. There's never any other shot going to happen.
No. Same shot over and over again. Yeah.
So you're not even like combining shots. So for example, it might be like, cross court, forehand down the line, backhand, then smash. Nothing like that.
No, there's none of that. I mean, if you wait a minute, I can tell you what they were, the tests. I've got a picture of the sheet. Just find it while we're talking.
So is it very much based on a skills test model?
There's some conjecture as to where this model came from.
Right.
So here we go. There's the tests are rally straight, forehand cross, backhand cross, volley, overhead lob overhead, forehand attack, second serve defense, second serve attack, return defense, return attack. And there's a international, national, regional, county and club norm for each of those and for each age from under 11s to under 14s.
And give me an example of let's say a county level under 13 or under 14 norm.
A county level volley for under 13s would be 9 to 11.
9 to 11 volleys?
Yeah.
In a minute?
I don't know what the time frame is there. I can't help you on that. It doesn't say the time frame on the sheet I've got, but right. Regional is 12 to 14, national 15 to 16, and international is 17 or more.
Okay.
Right. but what there's been conjecture of is, for example, how do we know these international numbers? Because I don't think the other countries are doing them. And if they are, I don't think they're giving us their figures.
Right.
So, yeah.
So this must be based on our international players.
It could be. I think it's more likely to be made up.
Somebody's just started working it out. Yeah. It seems to have a degree. I have to say, it has a suspicious level of linearity through the age groups and through the levels.
Yeah.
Almost like somebody's placed it into an Excel spreadsheet and put a little.
It's on an Excel. What I just read you out is on an Excel. Yeah. So.
Are there formulas as to what the next? You're clicking a cell. Does it give you a formula? Because that might be indicative of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something that I used to do. I used to do regional training. I don't do it so much anymore. I kind of fill in on it sometimes, but I've done it. I've been in once in the last year, and I don't want to be putting people down because these are good people and they're good coaches who are doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's the model that we've decided that our regional training will be based around these types of drills.
So I have to own up to having been somebody who, for quite some time, having worked in golf, and I think there's some interesting similarities between golf and tennis as sports. But I am someone who, before I knew any better, devised this kind of skills test type model as a developmental framework for, kind of players, on the basis that my thinking was, if you can do all of these kinds of shots with some level of capability, then you ultimately will, aggregate up to a player. This idea of sport as techniques, aggregation of techniques.
Yeah.
So I was definitely in that mindset, and I was thinking along those lines. But then, I suppose, obviously we've moved into a different world yet, so I guess I can understand the thinking, and if it has come from that, at least it would have some kind of basis, because there are there is some scientific basis to that. But the suspicion perhaps here is that maybe it isn't that.
I think it's, if I'm going to show sympathy on it, I think with the way that sports move now, and you've got with KPIs and stuff like that, I think the coaches probably have to feel that they are giving some figures back, and it's not just random, and it's not just let's go out there and play. But there's a disconnect, I think, between doing that and what tennis and elite level sport actually is, which it's not maths and it's not a spreadsheet.
So you've got a point there. I think measurement, isn't it? It's about the funding agency, the organisation.
Yeah. And look, you can't. It's one of those ways that the tennis. It's hard to describe whether you've got better at something. And with your results you can use, but you've played different people from this month to next, so you don't know if you've improved. Or you might beat somebody who you lost the last month, but they might not have played as well. So one way of seeing how somebody's improved or hasn't improved is how many forehands they can hit into an area in a minute.
But I suppose then the acid test would be if by doing this, that then translates into higher levels of performance. Yeah,
it would be. I guess we'll only know that a couple of years down the line. And that there's a lot of variables. There might be improvements in performance, but then again, I'll always maintain that you get better at stuff if you get better at tennis just by playing tennis anyway. If I get better at something, I suppose this is the root of all these type of arguments, isn't it? That if I get better at something, is it because I was doing this particular thing, or was that irrelevant?
Yeah. So, interestingly, one of the things that I just thought was, about this is that you said earlier that that's not what high-level tennis is. So obviously these are players in the pathway, right? So we're not talking about recreational tennis. We're talking about kids who are actually on a developmental journey, and this framework has been created as a means by which to measure progression. I get that. I understand where they've come from. I think the logic is flawed, but hey ho. You just said a minute ago that top-level tennis is not like that. So what is it that you're either seeing or doing in that top level arena that's enabling players to perform at the highest level?
With regards to, do you mean what's different from what's different from the norms training?
Yes.
I mean, I think that the competition's a lot different. I think in Britain in particular, I don't think we have a substantial enough competition structure that either at any level, I think it's let down at every level at the minute in British tennis.
Yeah.
Right from regional training. I mean, a mate of mine suggested a couple of weeks ago that, and I agree with him, that all under 10s competition should be team based. To take away any sort of pressures and allow opportunities for experimentation and creativity and that kind of thing.
That would make sense.
And
it would build a social aspect.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons. And there's no drawback to it either, I don't think. What's the drawback to that? You'd still be playing individual matches, but you'd be playing them as part of a team. Again, if I'm going to be if I was going to be an idealist, I'd love to see sort of conditioned matches as well.
Okay, go on.
As opposed to just using it in training, so you're just going to put conditions on a match,
right.
Or award extra points if you do something in particular, that kind of thing.
So
at a young age,
building that kind of match player capability within it. Right.
Yeah. Maybe even at I don't know, an under 10s or something, it might be a ridiculous idea. I might get laughed at for this, but you get 2 points if you win a point from the net or with a drop shot or something.
Right.
We do it in training. Why not put it in an actual match for development of players?
Or you could, for example, within a team game for each rubber, you could, for example, you could have each rubber could have different conditions on it, and then you could rotate the team around based on particular skill sets and things like that, which would be quite interesting.
Yeah. And I think so I think that's one of the things. I don't think in certain countries there is a lot of closed drilling. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things. But I think within that, in Spain they do a lot of that, but they also play a hell of a lot of tennis matches in Spain.
Yeah.
So I guess they get the balance out. They offset it. They offset the closed drilling with the amount of matches that they play at a young age.
Yeah.
Or at not a young age. We play a lot of matches at a young age here, but I'm talking sort of between 12 and 16. They do a lot of closed drilling, but they offset it with so many matches every weekend. Whereas here we don't play so many matches.
So so we just have the closed drilling and not the matches.
Well, we have matches. I don't think we have enough.
Yes.
And I don't think the competition structure as a whole it's not incentivized enough to want to play more matches. Whereas
it's kind of, I mean, it may be different now, but so I decided I was one of these kids who loved the game, self-taught, went to the school courts, kind of played until my feet fell off.
Yeah.
And decided one day I wanted to get rated when they had the ratings.
Yeah.
And then, wanted to play in matches. But of course, you need to have parents who aren't working to take you to matches.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit skewed towards the kids who've got the support. And like you said before, if you did it in a team-based way, then maybe it's only one parent who can take the team and they can do it on a rotational basis and things like that, or
totally.
Or might actually say, we'll give a coach to this group here and they'll travel with them and give them the support.
And it's also, it needs to be more localized as well. Sure. I mean, I know when I was playing, I was brought up in Barnsley. I could play in the summer, I could play about 9 out of 11 weeks in Leeds at decent level tournaments. I wouldn't have to leave Leeds. Right. To play the same level of tournament now, there's probably one of those a week, which is a British tour, and they can be anywhere around the country.
To play at the same level?
Yeah, because that was the highest level of tournament you could play at. They were called Summer Series events, and there was one tournament, there were staggered draws. So you'd always come across, your first 2 matches would always be someone around about your level. If you won them, you'd go and play someone the next level up, and you'd stagger it until at the end of that tournament somebody was ranked in the top 20 in the country, men's, because there'd be money tournaments as well.
Right.
But we don't have those anymore.
Wow. And is that just because the nature of the game has changed, or less people are playing, or what's changed?
There's nothing specifically why it should have changed. I think some decisions were made. They were a bit freeform, and they played for money, and I think some people didn't like that idea, and but I don't think they worked at a loss. They made money, but we just changed the system, and it's not how it is now. It happened maybe 10, 15 years ago. They took them out, but I think if you go in France, Spain, Germany, there's a hell of a lot of localized competition at appropriate levels. Right. And I think that's what you always need in any sport. You need localized appropriate competition. At any other sport, no matter what level I am, I'll be able to find competition within 30 minutes drive of my house. And that's not necessarily the case in our sport at the minute. I might be able to find some level, but if I want to play golf competition, I'll be able to find a tournament most weeks of the year that will take into account my handicap, and I can go and play it. Football, regardless whatever the level of footballer I am, I will be able to find an organised match on a weekend. Cricket, the same. Tennis, not so much.
It's fascinating, actually. it's interesting the way sports evolve and develop, isn't it? And I think, and like you say, people have made decisions over the years. I mean, I know, for example, in quite a few sports, they, the way they develop their competition pathway has emerged. They would like to go back to what it was before and play a lot more localized, but then things sort of spiral out of control, don't they? And they can't do anything with it. But it's a major influence on player development, isn't it?
Oh, entirely. Absolutely, entirely. And I think it's one of those as well, because if you can't get decent practice, your competition becomes your practice.
Bear with me, Calvin. Sorry. Just bear with me a second. There we go. Yeah, no, didn't think I'd get away with it. There was a, I think the dog was eating the floor mat and decided to try and eat it and chew it. And there we go. So it's a major influence on development.
Yeah, because I think that, like I say, if you don't have regular practice, then competition becomes your practice. You might just go out there and go, look, I'm just going to go play as many matches as possible, and that's my tennis.
Yeah.
And we kind of don't have that at the minute. So
I used to be a big advocate back in the days of LTAD. I used to be a big advocate of kids not spending enough time in practice and doing too much competition time. And because they were doing so much competition, they were just used to get data that they were playing loads and loads of competition. So they'd be traveling and just becoming really good at sitting in cars.
Yeah.
But I've come to the conclusion now that because the quality of practice can be so poor, that sometimes they're actually better off if they are playing.
Yeah, and I think as well, as long as the environment's right and they don't feel too pressured, and every tennis match doesn't feel like it's got hell on earth hanging on it.
Sure.
Then, are you better off doing that, or are you better off? Often the time, what's the difference? Is it any different if we go and play a tournament, or if we rock up and go, right, let's play a couple of sets to practice? Yeah. It's the same thing.
You can find the right level of competition and like you say, and play with conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we'll see how it pans out.
So, one of the reasons we decided to get together and chat again was you listened to the It Depends podcast.
Yeah.
And it sparked a few thoughts, and then you went to a tournament and and you came back with a few ideas. So let me know, what was it?
So there's a couple of things actually in that I thought I might have something to offer. I might have misjudged it. I might be talking absolute garbage, but it was one of the things that sort of one of the first, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. I've got some notes. Was I've heard this it depends thing before, but not necessarily in the same context. When I sort of saw it was an it depends thing, I thought it was more, for example, somebody would ask me, how should I hit a forehand? And the answer to that would always be, well, it depends. Yeah. And that's where it sort of lies in tennis coaching, that it depends line. But that's not really what this was about. And I'll start by saying one of the things, I forget who said this, but I was once told about the difference between strategy and tactics. Mm-hmm. And that strategy would be, in tennis, strategy would be developing an overall game style, the skills that they have, how they're going to play. Yeah. So you might be for example, you might be a serve volleyer. And so we're going to develop the skills you need. That's going to be your strategy overall. You're going to serve volley in most of the matches you play. Yeah. And tactics would be what you would use in specific situations, in a specific match.
Yeah.
And that would be the difference in it.
Yeah. And
through that It Depends podcast, I think it was Nick who brought up something about the match that his team were playing against Chelsea, and they were 4-0 down after 7 minutes. Yeah. And that kind of thing. And do you then intervene as to with the kids? Do you give instruction, that kind of thing? And so at the weekend I was at a tournament where it's a team tournament, under 18s girls, and it's the only event really that we can go onto the court and coach in tennis, because coaching is not normally allowed in a match. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give a specific example of what happened. So one of the girls on our team was playing a girl who she wasn't expected to beat. She was underdog. Not a massive underdog, probably a 70-30 underdog though. she's going to set down early doors. She's going to break down early doors, lost the set easy, and she's a breakdown in the second set. And the opposition girl was absolutely pummeling her with her forehand, just literally smashing forehand winners all over the shop. And it was quite intimidating. And our girl was quite sort of disheartened that she couldn't really do anything. She was putting balls in court. She was doing all she could do. But this girl was just hitting forehand winner after forehand winner after forehand winner. Her backhand side was a slice, backhand slice. Didn't really do any damage, but didn't ever break down. Just a nice backhand slice that she just kept chipping in to a good length. That was what she used to sort of maintain it until she could get a forehand. Mm-hmm. So I went on the court, and I don't want to sound this like I'm boasting or anything, because that's not really what I'm trying to do. But I went on the court and said to our girl, because she was at this stage, I think she was 6-3, 4-2 down. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I don't know what I can do. I'm out of ideas here. I don't know what I can do. Mm. And I said, well, on the basis that this girl, she's hitting forehand winners all over the shop, but she hasn't had to do that under pressure yet. She hasn't reached the pressure moment of having to close the match out. And she's making these forehands, but I'm interested to see if it will break down, because that's more likely to break down than her backhand, because her backhand, she hasn't missed all match. Mm. She's just chipping it away, and that means you're going to eventually break down. So I'd said to our girl, let's just see, keep going to her forehand and see if it breaks down. Let's see if it breaks down under pressure. Long story short, she did. She broke back in that set when the girl served for the match, won that set. In the third set, she ended up winning the third set 6-4. And on the last 8 points that she won on the match, the opposition girl missed 7 forehands out of it. Mm. So when she'd come off, the girl said to me, I thought you were crazy telling me to go to her forehand, because all she's done all match is hit forehand winners. And I've never thought about it that way before. I never thought about it through your thought process of that's her weapon, but it's also the thing that is most likely to break down in her game.
Yeah.
So on that basis, I started thinking after listening to the podcast that when we say this, it depends. I didn't alter a strategy. It was specifically the tactics that I gave her. Mm-hmm. And I wondered whether, rather than sort of go, it's either we're letting something emerge and we're manipulating constraints and that kind of thing to do that, or give instruction, is there a middle ground that is more of just a discussion between two people? Mm. And secondly, I thought I could have asked her a lot of questions, mm-hmm. and I could have sort of tried to get her to discover that herself. She wouldn't have done it in that match, but I wondered in her words, I would never have thought about it that way. And obviously she might have done eventually, but she wasn't doing it recently. And I wondered, I don't see what the drawback would be in me saying, I want you to do this, but specifically for this reason. If you offer the reason, it's not just me saying autocratically, go to a forehand, end of subject.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
There is there's a few fundamental differences based on the scenario, and it's, funnily enough, Alan Keane contacted me after the It Depends podcast. Uh-huh. And he's working in a basketball context, and with a similar type of question linked to, in the kind of performance environment, in the mm-hmm. in the competitive environment, and the use of instructions in those contexts.
Yeah.
And I think probably one of the things that we didn't clarify, and I think one of the things that made it slightly maybe confused it, is when Nick brought up the in the game scenario.
Right. Yeah.
And the model in the game.
Yeah.
And where so I think I talk a lot about form of life. So the scenario you're in, the context you are in as a coach, mm-hmm. affords certain opportunities. So, for example, if you're in a learning space, so you're working with an athlete on, say, tactics, in preparation for a match, and, or preparation for forthcoming matches, series of matches, you might have created some scenarios for her to experience around, somebody with a real good forehand weapon and what you might use and this, that, and the other. You might have asked her some questions about the approach you might take. You might have explored various opportunities. And the reason for that is that you're in a learning space and you've got the time to be able to do that kind of exploration, place the learning emphasis there. But in a performance space, you're constrained by time. I mean, it's a change of ends. She's got a minute. You've maybe got a minute, haven't you?
Yeah.
Something
a minute and a half. Yeah, minute and a half.
So it's not as if you can enter into an extensive dialogue about strategy and tactics. You really kind of, and she's actually looking to you now, and she's actually surrendered. Said, "I've got nothing.
Yeah.
Give me something, coach."
Yeah.
Now, of course, it would be a psychopath that didn't offer something there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'll just ask you a few questions. I mean, I understand it depends from that perspective, because in that context, in the performance context, there are only certain courses of action available to you. So the constraints are such that you can only act in that way. But I guess where we were talking from and where this got a bit confused was when we're saying, firstly, I don't mind the it depends. I just like people to follow up on what it depends on.
Yeah.
Justify your methodology based on certain situations. Don't just act and then try and come up with some reason why that's an appropriate thing to do. But I'm talking about the learning space predominantly when I'm saying, in my view, there is a certain array of, in the skill acquisition space, not the skill performance space. For me, in my view, there are an array of methodologies that if you contravene, so if you instruct there in learning, then you are changing the dynamic of the athlete to coach interaction, which then can compromise the athlete's willingness to engage in that learning process.
Okay.
But in the performance space, it's slightly different.
Yeah, I think though. I mean, I think even in the learning space, do you think there's ever any situations where you can go, is there any negative to me just telling them something here?
So again, I guess that there isn't necessarily there is a potential. There is a lot of potential negative.
I know sometimes. I know sometimes there is. Again, this is where it depends thing. Is there sometimes where you think, well, I could just tell them and save some time, and it doesn't have the negative. This particular instance won't have a negative, if you know what I mean.
So being an adherent to, or an adherent, is that the right word? Or a disciple, maybe, of the ecological approach, I have chosen myself to avoid the telling scenario. And the reason I've chosen to avoid that is because, well, two things really. It's a personal constraint, because I used to be brilliant at it. I used to love it, and as you can tell from sometimes when I go on rants on the podcast, I can tell people stuff. So I've chosen to avoid that in order to try and challenge myself. But also it's because I'm fervently of the belief that the athlete needs to be able to seek the solutions, because there are times in competition when we cannot solve it for them. In fact, there's most of the times.
I'm with you on that. I think what I should have clarified there is I'm talking specifically about when you're further on in development.
Okay.
And can I give you another example? Because I know in the last time you went on the podcast, you went into music, how this goes into music. And I like music quite a lot, and I do a lot of reading about music and reasonable, decent music trivia. So I'm going to go into the Beatles. The Beatles, before they recorded the White Album, they went to India with a group of other musicians, and Donovan was one of them. Donovan was playing with Paul McCartney. They were both jamming. Donovan literally showed him a finger picking technique that he called a claw hammer, which was Paul McCartney could already finger pick, but Donovan showed him a different method, a specific method of doing it. McCartney went away and he wrote about 7 or 8 songs on the White Album using that. They didn't discover it. Now, McCartney at that stage was obviously a astute musician, but Donovan has literally said to him, do this. And because of that, all these other songs emerged out of it. if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Am I making sense there?
Yeah.
And I thought then, once you've got to a certain level, is there harm of just somebody saying, have you thought about it? Not, I don't really even want to say it's instruction, but have you thought about this?
Sorry, I've just been distracted.
It's all right. It's all right.
Asking me if she, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes. She's basically saying, can she have some snack or something, which obviously is taking advantage of the fact that I'm talking to you, Calvin.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Now, but you say it isn't, but that's the point. That isn't instruction, is it? You've just said,
that's the thing. Yeah.
Have you considered this?
Yeah. That's it. And I think that's the middle ground. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, that's what Andrew Wilson said about how there is a space for instructions in the ecological approach, which threw me a little bit. But what he was saying is that because what you're doing there is you're not saying this is how to do it. You're saying the answer a potential answer might be found here.
Yeah.
Now you still need to explore within that. So McCartney still needed to go away and
pick up the
claw hammer for himself.
Yeah.
But somebody said there's something in here that you might find interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I imagine he went away and actually did his own version of the claw hammer, perhaps.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I assume so.
Knowing him.
Yeah. That's it. But then I sort of started thinking about, I don't know if this is relevant to the sport thing, but I thought this is kind of like the same as, again, with music. It's like somebody saying to me, who already likes music, already knows their stuff, and going, I like this type of music. And it's like me going, all right, well, have you heard this band or this album? And they go away and they go, yeah, listen to that, and I absolutely loved it. The alternative would be I don't say anything, but I go and tell them to listen to everything on Spotify and find that band eventually themselves.
Right.
And I
thought, that's where constraints come in. It's not an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like on Spotify, when you scroll down a playlist and then it gives you a bit like Amazon. You might also like.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, it's the same as. It's not saying you have to like this.
Yeah.
It's saying again, I think this would be up your street.
Yeah, and you're saying, and so to bring it back to a sports context, you're saying, you're seeing, right? So in this scenario. And this is where I think the skill comes in, is the athlete. And let's go back to the example you used with the girl there.
Yeah.
So she'd run out of ideas, which is a way of basically saying, I haven't got a relevant framework of tactical thinking that is going to give me an answer to this particular problem that I'm solving. And I can understand actually in the and so one of the things I would say there is that so what she hasn't quite yet got through experience or whatever is become attuned enough to information sources around that opponent. Not surprised, is it? Probably not played it before. That would afford her the opportunity to consider the course of action that you presented in front of her. And so what I would say there is, in the learning space, what we might do is we might produce a series of constraints that give an athlete a series of opportunities to explore the possibilities. So for example, you might come up against someone with a power forehand. Yeah. And then begin exploring, right, well, if I place them in these sorts of situations and they feel like I'm feeding them their strength could actually work against them, and begin to explore. Because just one question I had about that was, did you literally just say feed her forehand, or did you say, what about feeding her forehand, but feeding her forehand in a certain way?
No, I said I'd be interested, specifically, so I remember it, and I've sort of simplified it a bit too much there. I said I'd be interested to see if her forehand holds up under pressure if you're keeping a good length and making her hit it on the move.
Right.
Not do this. I was specific to not say this will definitely work. I was like, I'm going to be interested to see if it holds up under pressure when she has to serve for this match. That
is brilliant in the sense of, I think that's exactly what Andrew Wilson's talking about. He is saying there may be, and I love it. It's quite good actually. You've given yourself a little bit of a get-out clause there, haven't you?
Shoot 5 forehand winners, finish the match 6-4, 6-4.
Well, I was just interested to find out. We found out now.
That's it. Yeah.
But what's interesting is that you actually have said to her, there may be an answer here. What about that? And she's still an active participant in the decision-making process there.
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to you literally saying, right, just keep firing it there. A lot of coaches would have just gone in there and goes, right, you're not hitting with enough depth and you need to keep her on the move. And if you keep her on the move, it'll be all right. That's not giving her any of the why and the when there, has it?
Yeah. No, and I think that was
did she do it? Did she execute that in terms of the depth and the...
Yeah, she executed it perfectly. And I think, but what's more important for me from that was not that she actually won that match. Is that after she came off and she said, I've never thought about something that way. And I think in terms of just because someone has a weapon, it doesn't mean you can't go there. And two, just because it's a weapon now, doesn't mean that it will be a weapon at
certain situations.
6'4", 5'4", 30 all. And it proved to not be a weapon then. And I think
that valuable learning experience from that competitive.
I think that's something she'll take from it. But I think I don't think it would have had any effect if I'd have done it, if I'd have given it instruction wise. But I was keen to make it a conversation rather than me coming on and saying, this is what you've got to do. You're not doing this.
And I think that's, for me, that's so powerful, isn't it? Because again, you've chosen deliberately to make her part of the discussion and the decision making.
100%. Yeah, I think you've got to do that. I think it's. I don't think you can make them think that they're relying on you, because they're not. It's we play about in that role we play a minor part in it. They've still got to get the ball deep and on the run.
So flicking back to our point about it depends. So the point being is we can be perhaps more. The closer you are to competition, or in fact, when you're in competition, we obviously can be more directive in our interventions. We might have to be because of the nature of the situation that we're in. Yet we still have a choice as to the how of that. We can still choose to make the athlete a part of the conversation, or we can remove them from the decision-making process and say, me as coach, I know what's best. Here is the answer. And you have deliberately chosen, and this is where for me the it depends bit falls down, because if you say it depends, it's like, well, I can just tell them what to do when I need to. But you've actually said, no, I'm going to stay true to my philosophy, which is to place the player in the center of the learning process. Now, instead of it being entirely player-led, it's now coach offering, player discussing, making an agreed action, right? You've still kept true to that, though. You haven't lost the philosophy. And now in a different context, you might have said it's actually more player-led. Tell me more. Tell me what's happening. You feed to me, and we, so it's still, but you're still keeping the player in the center of the process. And I don't think there is any compromise there, really.
No, I think that's the thing. But I also thought as well, if we go a bit further, and again, it's specifically on tactics, but I guess this is more instruction again. And I might be sort of speaking not what you were talking about the other day again, but purely in terms of like scouting. Like I said, if you're a serve volley player and I'm going to go, and you haven't seen the player you're going to play against, and I'm going to go, look, every time it gets to 30 all, if you serve to his forehand, he's going to chip the return. So you can take a chance on it. Or, his backhand, he'll panic on his backhand on big points. Keep going to his backhand. That's instruction. That's literally telling you. You're not having to figure anything out there. But again, I don't think there's any drawback in me telling that, because I can leave you to it to discover it. But I don't think there's any benefit of you discovering that. You might get that, and you might get it half an hour in, or I can just tell you, and you can get it from the start.
Well, and like you said, you're constrained by time. So in some respects, you have to get information in the most expedient way possible. However, even in that scenario that you've provided there, you're not telling them this tactic will do this tactic and you will win. You're saying there's an answer to be found in something that they're doing.
It's funny that, because Louis Caillet, who is a tennis coaching guru, he said whenever he's scouting, he's always makes. When he scouts and when he gives a report to his players, he never says they always do this. He always says they usually do this.
Right.
And he said that's always the get out of if the scouting reports if they don't do it, because it might be a big point You might be expecting that on this point they're going to serve down the tee and they serve wide.
Mm.
All you've told them is this is what usually happens.
Yeah.
Not what is going to happen.
Yeah.
So then it's up to them whether they.
Well, because of course
go with it.
there's going to be scenarios where an individual intends to do something and then for whatever reason either mishits it or changes their mind at the last minute because they cue to you or whatever.
Yeah.
And and all that. Do you know something else I was interested about in tennis, right? So I often see whenever you're watching matches, and of course watching matches on TV and you hear the commentators, and you must watch matches on TV and hear the commentators and just go, oh God, for God's sake, guys, you're miles away. But I watch games and you'll see somebody kind of change tactic. Like, for example, they'll, almost like do a bit of a surprise serve and volley.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is the opponent reacts to the serve and volley and hits this clean winner, right?
Yeah.
And then the person who's hit it walks back forlornly to the service line. And almost you can see them going, well, that didn't work. I'm not doing that again. Sometimes you see them looking up to the gallery, to the coach, and just, like we're going to do that again. And there's a part of me that thinks, just because they did that once doesn't mean that the whole tactic is completely out the window. We might want to have a few more sources of data than that.
It's funny because at this tournament I was out the weekend where it's the only time I can sit on court the whole time. Yeah. And I think the phrase that I probably used the most over the weekend was unlucky, good idea though.
Yeah.
And, because when they'd done something, they'd tried something, they might have tried a drop shot or they might have tried coming to the net and miss the volley or something.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, to go. But I think it's that one, isn't it? It's from that, it's from the Michael Kahneman, Eamon Tversky book. It's that bias. You're making a decision on too small a sample size.
Exactly.
I did it once and it didn't work, so it'll never work.
Yeah.
It's and that's that's what it is, isn't it?
And the likelihood is that you're going to have a situation where the individual on the receiving end sees you coming, right, and just reacts, and because they're purely reacting to that, they actually don't even attend to the movement, and they're like amount of times I've received a first serve that's slightly out, and I've played it and I've hit this screaming winner because I've played it with pure freedom, and it's almost the same thing, isn't it? They're just hitting the winner because they have to, but can they do it over and over and over again? That's the interesting challenge.
Yeah, and you just never know what's going through your opponent's mind. That's the thing with tennis. You don't know what they're planning. You might be planning something. They might have already planned to return in this place, in which case you're losing the point anyway. It might not matter whether you've serve volleyed.
Yeah.
You might serve to my forehand, and I've already decided I'm leathering this one down the line. So it doesn't matter a jot whether you're on the service line or on the baseline. It's going straight past you. Or in my case, probably going to the back fence. But
something you just said earlier about that unlucky nice idea. What I love about that is what you're doing is you're differentiating between the decision and the execution.
Yeah. And I think this was, and that on the same side was in the same story that I told about the girl who I was on court with. What made me think about that in the first place was that her opponent was hitting winners that were bad decisions a few times.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's too bad a decision for you to keep doing that. And I said this to the girl when I was on the court, and I said, if she's going to keep hitting those forehands for winners like that, then she shouldn't be at this tournament. She should be over at qualifying for Indian Wells.
Right.
Because, she's hitting shots that within her were outside of her normal skill set.
Yeah. To use a bit of Rob Gray's research, it's called the hot hand, isn't it? It's basically she's just got a bit of flow going.
Yeah.
And she's hitting a few shots and she's riding the crest of a wave, but it's not going to stand up.
Yeah.
Particularly that was the thing, under a bit of pressure.
Yeah. Under pressure and over the course of a match.
Yeah.
If you're going to be on court here for 2 hours, you're not just going to hit 2 hours of forehand winners. At some stage, it's going to stop.
Yeah.
And I said to the girl as well, when she hits a winner, that's fine because we want her to keep going for it. What we don't want is for her to stop doing that because this tactic's working. So if she makes 2 errors, 1 winner, I'm more than happy with that because she's going to keep thinking, I can still hit the winners.
Okay. Can I propose just an idea to you on the unlucky nice idea feedback?
Sure.
So one of the things that the Dutch hockey guys, I've met a few Dutch hockey coaches in my time, and one of the things they said, he says that you guys in Britain, you say unlucky all the time.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, in Holland we never say unlucky.
Yeah. It annoys me when I say it because I don't think a mate of mine as you know, and it's a fair idea that there's no luck in sport.
Yeah.
Everything, you know, not it pans out, but if you get a net cord and it drops over, then it's because you've hit the ball at just the right height.
Yeah.
It's not lucky. It's just a millimeter the right height. And you know, and it's the same at football with if you get deflection.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's not luck. It's just it hit an opponent and went in the net.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not luck. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not.
Well, it's like, is it Gary Player? Who was it said? You know, I miss 100% of the shots that I don't take.
Yeah, and the more I practice, the luckier I get. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the point for me though is that I think the point of differentiating the decision from the execution is really important.
Yeah.
I guess the important bit of that feedback is to say it's a nice idea.
Yeah,
we want more of that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. No, I think so. Yeah,
because you're drawing her attention at that point to the reasons why her choice of shot was appropriate. What was based on what you're seeing was worthy. The fact that it didn't happen is an execution problem.
Yeah, and I think it's important to get it in. What I was always trying to do as well is get it in straight away, as soon as the point's finished.
Yeah.
So there's no time for the negativity to get in. Just as soon as if they've missed it, as soon as they've missed it, yeah, great, good idea. Let's have more of that.
What do you do if, for example, let's say she keeps going for that shot, right, in exactly the right circumstances, but essentially keeps failing with the execution? What do you do at that point?
It's a good question. I think you've still got to keep doing it because it's one of those where I've said to players, but when we've had discussions before matches, look, let's come off and say that you made the right decisions. If you make the right decisions enough of the time throughout, we're not playing for this one match, we're playing for this year.
Yeah.
And if you make the right decisions throughout the year, then you're going to be happier at the end of the year than not.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. We don't want to do it twice and then revert back to type.
Yeah.
So I think you've just got to still keep saying it. If it is good decision, and it's one of them, Stu, if it is good decisions, either we've got it massively wrong with the tactics, or your opponent's going to have to play out their skin to avoid it.
Because eventually she's gonna resolve the execution problem.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, you know that they've got it in the tank. You wouldn't even, for example, if I've told somebody to come into the net to an opponent's backhand when they're on the run, I wouldn't do that if they couldn't volley.
Yes.
Because although the tactic might be great for someone who can volley, if the other girl has a shaky volley, you're not going to tell them to do it. You're going to think, well, that'd be ideal, but it's not going to work. You come up with a different tactic. So you'd only give them tactical advice if you knew they could carry it out.
So if she, for example, so great. So, but if for example, like let's say for some reason, she's got some sort of issue with her volley, whereby whether it's some sort of technical issue or she's got some sort of I don't know, maybe she's missing the cues or whatever it is, and it's not working, for her, and then she starts to lose a bit of confidence, right? And then and so she goes into, because I've been on a tennis court where that downward spiral occurs. That's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
Feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when nothing's working. But what I was going to say is what happens when in that scenario, in terms of how would you? Because at that point you may be considering adjusting the tactic because the weaponry that she would normally bring to the table or to the court isn't there for whatever reason. So how do you go about altering the tactics, or don't you? Do you just say let's stay here?
I think if I know that, for example, we just use specifically the volley here. I think if I know that they can volley, if I know that they're a good volleyer and they're just having an off day, I won't draw their attention to it. Because I think that's only going to make matters worse. Sure. If they're questioning it, and I think sometimes if they think that I don't mention it, then they might think, well, it's not as bad as I'm thinking it is.
Right.
I think I'd change the tactic if it was shaky, if it was a bad volley, or if they don't have a volley or that kind of thing. But I think otherwise, I'd never say anything. I'd never say anything tactical. Sorry, I'd never say anything technical in a match. not remotely. I think that's one of the sort of principles that I have about coaching. And at the weekend, there were times when I was tempted to just say little bits of very, very basic stuff like faster hand on a couple of players, that kind of thing. But I thought, no, I'm going to stick to it. I'm staying away from anything, even skill based, really. That's, so it was always, has that answered your question?
Yeah, no, it has. And I mean, I think it's just interesting because, well, firstly, I can imagine you see other coaches, doing physical rehearsal moves to show the player what they should have done with the technical move. Do you see that quite a bit?
It's weird because you don't get. You mean it in a match?
Yeah.
In the mid.
Yeah.
At the weekend, I wasn't paying much attention because, that's the only time it can happen. So change of ends, and I had 2 courts going at the same time. So
okay.
I was over with one player, and you can only do it at the change of ends, obviously. So, if I'm honest, no, I didn't see much technical coaching going on.
Okay.
The coach, but I know the coaches who were doing the other teams, and they're good coaches. They're good guys, and so I think a lot of it was. It was a high intensity environment, and it was quite a pressured one. It's the only tournament where you got all the teams, you got a lot of people on the balcony, a lot of chanting going on, a lot of cheering when points get won, and that kind of thing. And so I think a lot of it was calming people down, and that kind of thing. So
I mean, I think it's interesting because with this kind of performance learning dynamic, I think. What you often get is, like in, say, football, you've now got, I think, coaches who are basically in training going, right, let the kids play. And then they go to matches and they're shouting instructions from the sideline.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of them. I always think you'd have to have quite a big ego to do that, though, to think that these can't get this job done without me. I think you're overselling your own importance and the importance of the match as well. I mean, it's like, when we're talking about what we're talking about, I was actually talking with Nick Levett the other day, and I said, up until 12 anyway, is there really an important match? Of course there isn't. It's like, not for the player. So I think when coaches do that, and it only causes confusion as well. I mean, another thing what I was always at the weekend, what I would always try to do is not go on too early. You could go on whenever you want. But I always think that if the player's losing and they see you coming on, then they're going to think, I'm doing something wrong here, if you know what I mean. So I was always keen to, if they'd gone a breakdown, to let them try and solve it first.
Yeah.
To, not to stress them out. And I think that would give the impression of, I must be doing the right thing, so I'll keep doing what I'm doing.
That's important, isn't it? Is to keep that space.
Yeah. Choose when you go on. And I also had an assistant captain as well, who's a girl, former player, very, very good former player, and a good coach, younger coach, and very calm. And it was a case of deciding who would be the best intervention, me or her, in each match, and in which situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think sometimes I thought, she'd be better at this instant than I would, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a bit like you in the performance space. I mean, I'm not a believer in complete silence, and I just don't say anything.
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in what I want to say to the people on the sideline who may have rotated off, and there's some information. We'll have a conversation about what they might be seeing and what have you. But in the game space, it may be that, the players just haven't, observed a particular situation. So I might want to draw their attention to certain things.
Yeah, I think it's that as well. I think there's a lot of that, because when they're in the match, I think that's another thing where we got to take advantage of that when we're watching. We'll notice things that they haven't, because they're wrapped up in the match.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and again, it's a discussion really. Like, you might not have noticed this, and then they might come on and go. I remember a few years ago, it was a coach who was coaching a girl who I played. It was a big hitter, huge hitter. And I was stood with her coach while they were playing. This was 5 or 6 years ago. And the girl who I coach was hitting huge forehands. And he was saying about his girl, this is ridiculous. She's just giving a forehand. She's giving a forehand. She's not getting the ball over here. She needs to be doing this shot. And I said to him, and I'm sure that his girl would have said the same. It's not that easy. It's not that easy when this girl's hitting bombs to be directing the ball. I'm not trying to give her forehands. I'm just trying to get the ball in.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get it to the other side, but
extend the point.
Yeah, that's it. I can't. But it's not always a tactical answer. It's not always a straightforward tactical answer. There's other elements involved in it as well. And and it's like one of them, isn't it? It's like you can plan to defend against Lionel Messi, but then he's Lionel Messi. and that just because he scores doesn't mean you haven't followed your plan. Probably because it's Lionel Messi. And that's it, isn't it? I guess last night, PSG, their manager might have come up with a brilliant tactical plan. He didn't plan for his defender giving the ball away with a minute gone. He didn't plan for his goalkeeper to spill the ball. And he didn't plan for a free handball in the last minute. But his tactical plan might have been fantastic. And on the other side, the other manager's tactical plan was. He planned it to perfection.
Yes.
And
he probably didn't plan for any of those eventualities necessarily. What he just planned for was for them to play in a certain way where these kinds of things might occur.
The plan was clear. Was let's keep it tight and see what happens. Let's don't go hell for leather. Let's keep it tight and see what happens. Well, he said himself, let's be in the game with 20 minutes to go.
That's by the way, just circling back to that example you've given me of that coach, right? That for me is a fundamental difference between the way somebody who is bought into a more, let's say, ecological or player-centered philosophy towards coaching versus somebody who is based on a sport as techniques model, right? So if you consider sport as techniques, then all you're doing is looking for the technical or tactical solutions that the individual might need that you can then provide them with. So in that scenario, he can see clear as day, she just needs to do this. And he'll tell her, potentially, you just need to do this. What he's not taking into consideration is what it is that is happening to that individual that is causing them to react to the opponent in a certain way. And that's the interesting bit. And that's the bit that you should be seeking to find out, which is just explain to me what's going on. What are you experiencing? Because actually then you can maybe then begin to foster a solution with that individual once you've got an idea of what they're experiencing.
You know what though, with that coach, and I don't ever think I'm definitely not an advocate that coaches have to have played at a certain level, but this coach had never played at any level really, and I think that was a problem. He couldn't compute why he'd given this game plan and the player wasn't executing it. He couldn't compute, and I think if you've played at any level, you can get, maybe they're just better than me. It doesn't have to be, maybe this player's too hard for me to execute this game plan. It's not always, they didn't do it right. And I heard a football manager, I don't even know who it was, the other day, and he came on the radio and he just lumped all the blame on the players. They didn't do anything I told them to. They're going to make these mistakes. That's not my fault. And I thought, I don't even know what it was, but I thought, I tell you what, you've gone from there to just disregard any responsibility whatsoever. It's on them.
I mean, and they're the moments, aren't they? They're the moments when, for me, whenever I hear a football manager do that, I know the game is up for them. They're done.
Totally. And I think that's. I think on that, with tactics, it's like I said, sport's dynamic. It's not. I mean, not all sport is diving, isn't, and things like that. And I think that is interesting. That was another thing I wanted to speak about. Actually, we could do that now. When you were talking about on the other podcast, the musicians with the scales and that kind of thing. And I think you can, if I put that in sport, I think you can be a bit like that if there's no intangibles in it. If it's gymnastics or diving, like that, I think then you can go down that method of the scales and that kind of thing. And I think again with with the music thing, what you were talking about, and what I think it was Mark who was using examples. I think the difference, and how I'd say the difference between that and the other way, and sport on the other way, is that those guys who he used that don't know the scales, don't know music, they're the creative types. They're the geniuses. Yes. They're the Paul McCartney can't read music, so he's not constrained by the rules, in inverted commas, of how you write songs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, you might want to be a session musician.
Yeah.
Where you have to have that knowledge and theory behind it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the same with diving, gymnastics, anything like that. You have to have that autocratic, repetitive theory, in inverted commas.
Well, I agree in the sense of those sports, particularly, let's take an example, gymnastics and diving, right, where they're actually judged for their aesthetic perfection.
Yeah.
So therefore, the nature of those sports is that you have to adhere to a particular aesthetic ideal in order to succeed. It's not as if there's, I'm gonna land in the pool this way, and look at that, that's creative. The opportunities for creativity are far, far, far removed. However, Keith David shared some really fascinating research about diving in terms of learning the experiences within diving and representative practice design. So just as simple as this, what he found was that a lot of divers would run up to the board to go take off, and if they, as they took off, felt something was wrong in their takeoff in terms of their balance, they would abort the dive and kill it.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So he addressed this by saying, just very simply, in order to make the practice more representative of the competitive environment, there's no opportunity to abort. What you have to do is perform the dive with a less than perfect takeoff, because the likelihood is you're never going to have a perfect takeoff. There's always going to be even a micro element of variability. And so the skill is actually micro adjustment in action, and the perception of action, and how you then adapt your movement in action in order to perform.
Yeah.
So that ecological model still works in a non-dynamic diving.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. No, I get that. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Because there are feedback loops happening in those moments.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. But I guess, entirely in the sport. I guess a bit different in music, isn't it? When you get orchestra and that kind of thing, it's you have to be so well drilled on that, I think. And I think as well within that, it brought me back to this documentary called Wrecking Crew, which is all the session musicians that played on a lot of hits in the 60s. And they take the other side of it. They're all classically trained musicians, jazz musicians, and the position they take is all these guys who are not, but they can't play properly. Yeah. They can't hold, the drummers can't hold a rhythm. Right. The bass player, and if you're in studio time, you want someone who can do it right. And I think it's the balance of getting both, isn't it? It's not just saying no, but if you don't know the theory, that's better because you're not constrained. It's better if you want to be creative, but if creativity isn't your main objective, then.
Well, I think in music, I don't want to go too far into music.
No.
Well, no, the danger is I don't know what I'm talking about, and B, Mark O'Sullivan will probably rip my head off. But the one thing I would say is that I think, like anything within music, there are rules. There's rules to the game.
Yeah.
So you succeed in making music by, firstly, making notes that sound something like the notes you're trying to make, and secondly, putting them in some kind of structure or order that then sounds audibly pleasing to certain people.
Yeah.
And the thing about that is, and then you combine it with others in a certain way that makes it, again, even more audibly appealing, etc., etc. And there are kind of rules in the same way that there are rules to games, rules to sports, in terms of how you create a successful performance. Yeah. But the how within that, there is still a great deal of variability within. And some of the, like you've mentioned earlier, I mean, some of the greatest musicians have stumbled across techniques or stumbled across combinations that have become some of the greatest sounds we've ever heard and then been replicated time and again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
So even again within that musical space, I think there's still space. Interestingly, like the Suzuki method. I heard this Epstein was talking with Gladwell recently, and he was talking about even in the Suzuki method, which is perceived to be very much about repetition and repetition and repetition. There's even within that, apparently Suzuki was taught, kind of self-taught, because he was brought up in a household with a musical father, and he kind of just jammed and riffed and jammed and riffed. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? How even people who developed in a certain way then develop a method to teach others, which may or may not be aligned to the way they develop themselves.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think it's again, it depends, isn't it? It's I think that's the way it is. Is that ideally you want both. You want that, I guess, in a way, a foundation, and then having that creativity as well. I think it's, if you take the creativity out, then you've got a problem.
And that's my concern in terms of the model that I adopt, which is I want to always leave the space for the creativity.
Yeah.
The danger of me getting involved too early with the solutions is that I destroy the opportunity for creativity, and I also make reliant players who then never become creative. And that's why I think the technical model, this is the way to play this game, is so dangerous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Listen, I'm on board with that all the way. I think on skills and constraints and how we teach them and that kind of thing, and how things emerge. I think I'm well on board on that. The only thing I think on technique, something that I was thinking about earlier on, this idea of technique, and I think we spoke about this last time, is this idea that there's a right way to do things, or how a shot should look, and how there isn't, which is nonsense. In a way, it is nonsense anyway. The only thing I was thinking was, if something is, in inverted commas, the right way, how you should do it, and there's tennis shots, this is how a forehand should look, right? And there's other ones that are big forehands that don't look anything like that. But the ones that are a bit funky, although they might get the job done a lot of the time, they're the ones that will always break down under pressure, I think. And I thought, although there isn't a right technique, is there some things that always have to be in place? It might not have to be them all, but is there some elements that have to be there?
Well, yes, I guess there are ingredients to successful performance that more often than not provide a successful performance outcome than others. The question is, how does an individual arrive at those moments? And even within those moments, there are still micro variables that have to be dealt with, because there is this in the concept of repetition without repetition. Even within something as repetitive as, for example, in Bernstein's model, it was about hitting a hammer, hitting them. Now, even in that, there is variability. There is adjustments being made, even almost imperceptible adjustments being made. And so in something as dynamic as tennis, where I'm running across court in order to try and hit a ball to a place that somebody else can't, to try and stop them from getting it back. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to do that, ever quite exactly the same.
No, well, this is one of those when people say to me, they'll go, I need some work on my forehand. And I always go, which forehand?
In which shot? Which forehand when against who?
It's about 200 times. It's like at least 200 times. And so, and it's not a stupid question, but the interesting thing is when people say that, they always, when a lot of coaches, they go, right, working on the forehand, it's always the ball that's fed mid-paced without much movement to the player's forehand. And it's like the hope that will solve the forehand in a match. You think, well, as long as they get that one every time, it will. But, as long as they're playing you with the basket, then
absolutely,
it'll feed it. And I think that's the thing. But I thought the way that I started going about it is thinking like, the simpler the better. There's, as long as there's less stuff that can go wrong. The shots that I always find it interesting to see, sort of different looking shots. But the ones where there's more that can go wrong under pressure, they're the ones that I think, yeah, you can do it, whether you're going to do it under pressure, because there's too much going on there. Am I making sense there?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I get it but I think in that case for me, that's when there's too much information for the player to be able to make sense of, and they haven't got enough of the control parameters in place to be able to actually execute that shot. So what they now need to do is to be exposed to those kinds of situations with those kinds of lacks of control parameters. And that's where you do get repetition without repetition. And people would consider that to be drilling. It's not. It's still got loads of variability because you're never really quite hitting the same shot twice.
No, and I think again, a similar state at the weekend. One of the other girls was a forehand, ground strokes looked a bit different, but they were really just simple. They weren't wrong or anything. They were just like, and the girl who was my assistant had said to me, like, you know, like, I think she was getting a bit worried that this girl was going to collapse under pressure. And I was like, looked at her shots. I was like, I don't really see what can go wrong though. It's not like the grip's funky or anything, or the elbow goes somewhere. They're both both wings are both, there's nothing, they don't look amazing, but they're both pretty simple. They're both back and forward. And there's little that can go wrong here, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Whereas if it had been something a bit more funky, I'd think, I don't want to see this at a tie, 6-all in a tie break. But, you know.
Listen, I've reached that moment of family crescendo, I think.
Right. No worries.
People have arrived and I feel like I'm neglecting, so I'm probably going to have to depart. But I've loved reconnecting. As always, it's a fascinating conversation exploring this thing that we do. Yeah,
for sure.
And let's stay in touch, and we'll probably check in again in another year's time or something.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. But I'm enjoying listening to everything anyway, and just enjoying the debate. I think the debate's the good thing. Everyone, as long as everyone's open to different discussions, and that's a good thing.
Remind people where they find you, Cal.
My Twitter is at Calvin Betton, all one word. That's about it. I don't really do.
You're not short of an opinion, so it's definitely one worth following, I'd say.
That's a kind way of putting it. I keep saying I'm having to tone it down, but I'm an argumentative sod and can't get that out of myself.
Well, that's it. You mentioned earlier that you come from the People's Republic of Yorkshire, so I think it's inbred, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is. Yeah. All right, listen.
Good to chat.
It's been great.
Cheers.
Speak to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
So there you have it. Great to catch up with Calvin there. It's been a while, but he's always got some views, some thoughts, and it was just great because he reached out to me following the panel discussion around the instructional side of things and just had some questions. I said, let's come and let's get back on, let's have a chat. Loved some of the stuff that we could explore there. I like his ideas about team-based tennis for kids. I think we need to do far more to open up opportunities to participate, and I think doing it in that way is quite fascinating. Interesting to see how norms drilling is still live and kicking in certain contexts. Some of the hangover from LTAD, I would have said. But I'm just really interested to hear about his method and his approach, and it's just fascinating to see the way he is exploring the learning and the development with that young female tennis player, looking at how she can compete and find a way to overcome some adversity. Fantastic. And then Mark O'Sullivan would have been delighted to hear us talking about some of the other stuff around music and the different methods that have been developed and what have you. And the claw hammer example was fascinating. As always, if you want to get on board and you want to join the learning community, the mastermind group, the conclave as I call it, there's some spots available. Head on over to the Patreon. You'll see all the details there. You'll be able to join in and join us in our next discussion, which is coming up very soon. In the meantime, I hope you have a great week of coaching, and remember, ditch those drills.